What is your superpower?
I'd probably say my creativity.
Knowing nerdy trivia.
My superpower is being a good listener.
Devising a million questions.
Helping people.
Making people laugh.
My superpower is that I'm determined and never give up.
I'm Harrison Lane, coordinator of the TAP program, here with Meristem's Executive Director, Erin.
What's up, Harry? How's it going today?
All right, how are you?
Pretty good. I know last time we were talking about maybe having Shay on the podcast. That's not going to happen today, but I think we got a good topic to explore with the community. Yeah, you want to jump in?
The way that this works is we're always going to tell you who's coming on, and they're never going to show up. No, but if we do have somebody confirmed, we will let you know. But these are people that we are going to be having on the podcast at some time. But you'll always see me, and you'll always see Erin. I think today we wanted to talk about. Last time we talked about taking response two-way street with the job seeker, with a student at Marist, just a two-way street between them and people that are helping them. But I wanted to step back and actually talk a little bit about, and I'll tell you where I get, so a little first of all, maybe a few different things, traits. The first thing, we talk about autism because we do focus on autism, but we don't only focus on autism. There are a lot of people that don't have autism, and if you look into it, actually you find that a number of people are underdiagnosed, and so they're having other situations and conditions. I'm not a psychologist by any means, but from my personal experience, and we've spoken to dozens of people across the state of California. We've presented to many groups that deal with this, and so we have a small understanding. I feel like it's very small, always have to say that. And each person is different. So I'm going to discover, like somebody was just telling me last week about a syndrome that I'd never heard of before, So I'm always learning. But the one thing is to understand what is neurodiversity. For those of you that don't know, we see an IDD, that's an intellectual developmental disability. That means that in the brain, things aren't always matching up and they're not always connecting. I mean, autism speaks, uses the puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Whatever your feelings there, but it is like the puzzle, the pieces aren't matching. When you talk about an auditory processing disorder, that a lot of the people that I have met with actually have it, it's where they hear something and they can't process it. They're misinterpreting information. So that could mean many different things. In the workplace, they could be misinterpreting what their manager is saying. They're not understanding it. People have problems with math, basic numerical. Well, if they get an accounting job, that could be a problem. There's just different things, but it's a wide spectrum. Even people that have dyslexia and ADHD are considered to be neurodiverse. Yeah. So it's a wide range, but I thought we would talk about a little about that and a little about it. The idea of understanding somebody, understanding a lot of people, and we have, and Erin could share, like, just the fact is we have a lot of people at Meristem that, for me, because I'm a little bit, and they use the word higher functioning. So many people with neurodiversity are going to be putting in the comments. We really need to disable the comments for this podcast episode, because they're going to be like, you can't say that, you can't say that. I don't know what to say, by the way. Yeah. So I hope I don't offend anybody by saying the wrong thing if you are having a neurodiversity or autism or whatever. But a lot of people, we find that have outbursts. At Meristem, right? I mean, we'll have, like he said, like Erin, you said, we'll have Shay on at some point, or maybe even another instructor. Like in the middle of class, they're having these outbursts, and from my understanding, it's like if you don't understand why they're doing, like you can't correct the behavior if you don't understand why they're having the behavior.
Right on.
What are your feelings about somebody having an outburst? And these people could be 25, 28 years old having an outburst in the middle of an art class.
Yeah. Well, it's great because like last time we were talking about two-way street and how important that is between an employee and an employer, particularly coming from the neurodiverse background, right. Going into the workforce, and making sure that there's both an environment that's set up for me to be successful, and I'm willing to be able to, make some changes and adjustments to kind of meet the accommodations that have been put in place for me. At the same time, like in Meristem, as you're bringing up behavior, like one of the things we try to do is understand what ultimately led to the reason that behavior manifested in it like initially. What's behind that thing that's maybe not as visible? Understand what the source of that is, and then work with that. So, like for a simple example might be somebody's really hungry. They might not have the verbal skills to communicate it, and so maybe they start getting angry or frustrated, or they hit the table or something like that. They're trying to communicate that they need something. If I, as a support, can figure out, hey, they're hungry, then I can get them some food, and that behavior no longer needs to be expressed because they got the food.
Right.
And then I can continue to build and be conscious of ways in which that person's going to try to communicate with me what their needs are around food, and we can even put in place structure so that they can even communicate more effectively, or get them the support they need to communicate around the needs, which is food, not the acting out, for example. And so, people, everybody's challenged. We all have impulsivity at some level. I think a lot of times when you're working with the nervous system, it's kind of an all or nothing system. So once it gets triggered, it goes and you can't get it back. But everybody's got their threshold for when it gets triggered, right? And so, we definitely have students at Meristem who get triggered and, have an outburst or whatever it is in a class. And I think to where you're going, Harry, is ultimately we try to figure out like what led to that threshold being pushed. And if you can get to the bottom of that, I think you can often adjust and figure out what can help to put in place. You were talking about an example right before we started. You want to share some of those?
Just that somebody is having an outburst and you understand why. But and I'm not remembering exactly what I said, but I did have another thing. So I will add that we are not, by no means, no way, how, a mental health podcast. We aren't professionals. So I always just like to say, I always just like to give a disclaimer, but I'm not discrediting anyone that has neurotypical. So neurotypical is somebody that is just that they're not neurodiverse. So they're not the type of person we're talking about having anxiety. But what I have seen amongst all the people that I've supported and the students at Meristem is that they all seem to have anxiety, right? Not everyone with anxiety has neurodiversity or autism, but a lot of the people with autism, neurodiversity, they have anxiety. And some of the anxiety that they have, it's stopping them. We have people with so much anxiety, it's stopping them from moving forward, and it's limiting themselves, and they're not harming themselves in the way that's very dangerous. It's dangerous for them. It's not gonna hurt them physically, they're not gonna take a life and cut themselves. But it's stopping them from doing anything. What would you say about that with anxiety? If as you look at the Meristem population, you see them every day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think just even with COVID, anxiety's been way on the rise, and to me, if you have a compromised nervous system, it's going to be hard to manage anxiety at some level. Anxiety can take over. We have our fight or flight system that's based off of how our nervous system operates, in the sense that, if something challenging or threatening comes into my environment, I'm either going to trigger my nervous system to fight back or to run away. And ultimately, anxiety is maybe a precursor to those systems firing or being in the process of being operational on a fight or flight basis. And so to me, really at Mirasim, I think the biggest thing we try to do is how do we help bring balance and like reflective quality to the practice of reading or navigating any situation. So like anxiety can dictate how I move, like, hey, I'm afraid to talk to that person, so I'm not going to talk to that person. Rather than me being like, oh, that person looks like somebody I really want to talk to, let me go try and talk to them and figure out how to process and work beyond what's making me anxious about that situation. There's also healthy anxiety, which is, I see somebody that looks threatening at some level. Maybe they're holding a big knife or something like that. And in that regard, maybe my anxiety is justified in the sense that, maybe I should question whether it's the right move to go and talk to that person.
That's true. And I think about it too, like in independent living, so in our dorms. And we are an open campus at Marathon. Just things like that. You do want the individual to be aware of the danger of like starting a kitchen fire, or you see a suspicious person. But again, I agree with you that you don't want to take it, Erin. You don't want to take it to the extreme. When it comes for me helping somebody get a job, oftentimes the anxiety is so much. They put up all these barriers. So the biggest thing is they have a list. The list is 14 pages long of things they won't do in the job. And again, we're person-centered, so I'm supposed to say, okay, I won't help you with that job because you don't want to work there. But it's very limiting. And so on the one, it goes back and forth. On the one hand, we say, work with us, have a two-way street where you work with us. So maybe all of those, you don't want to do half of those things. You don't want to work in customer service. You won't start before noon. The job, you're not a morning person, obviously. But maybe work with us. Maybe you're willing to start at 10, this and that. But when they're absolutely refusing, it can be very challenging to help them. And sometimes the job coach, the person here doesn't know what to do. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so I think behavior is a really good thing. So we were talking a little earlier, and you gave the example of, hey, somebody maybe has an outburst in class, and the teacher figures out there's too much lavender scent in the air.
Oh, in the soap
like
making class, yes,
right.
I remember that.
And that's like really overstimulating and kind of leading to this like, pushing of a threshold where
right.
I just got to I haven't figured out the means by which I can say, hey, instructor, like that doesn't smell good. Like, can I go outside, or can we do a different scent, or can we open up the window so I'm not overstimulated? If I don't know how to communicate that, it's going to build up until the point where I'm just like, I got to get out of here. Right. And so you have this like episode, but it's really something in the environment is there that's making it hard for me to stay present and do what I'm being asked to do. So I think as an employer, it's really important to be thinking about those things in their environment and saying like what can we actually put in place so that the least amount of stimulants are there for an individual to work effectively and not get pushed over their threshold very often if possible.
Right.
On the other hand, though, there's internal behaviors I feel like that are things that I do that I can be responsible for.
Yes.
Like showing up on time, going to bed early. Like that's not on the employer to change. And so to me, I have to ask myself the hard question, what behaviors that I have control of that I can work on in order to do things differently, like set a better sleep schedule, or
you bring up absolutely. For me, this is interesting. We see a lot of people that have this sleep schedule. So I've even got to bed very late. What would you say, Erin, to this? Because we have people that, I went to bed at 4 a.m. I went to bed at 2 a.m. So yes, I'm having trouble. And so you said if they could figure out their schedule to go to bed earlier. But I take it a step farther, and I'm like, even if you, the individual, it's just difficult for me because the employer doesn't care that you went to bed at 2 a.m. They still expect you to show up the next day. So yes, if you change your schedule, you would feel better and you would have more energy to get to work. But you still have to get to work irregardless of when you went to bed. How do you deal with the reality? It's basically the maturity to say, yeah, I screwed up and went to that rock concert last night. I was out until 2 a.m. drinking, but I still got to show up to work the next day.
No, that's a good question. I mean, all of us have coping mechanisms, right? Like drink a cup of coffee, take a nap at your lunchtime break, take a day off. That's why we have, ideally works have the sick time or vacation time. Like, sometimes you just got to do what you need to do for yourself, and make sure that you communicate well around that and proactively. But to your point, at the end of the day, like when I make a commitment, I'm making a commitment to do something and follow through on doing that something. And that to me is like long term. If like you want to get hired, if you want to get a job, if you want to move up in your job, if you want people to trust you, consistency is a big foundational piece to that, and being able to show up regardless of what your life circumstances have brought you to is a really important skill. We
had this come up the other day. We don't give details about people on here because that puts it inappropriate. But the broader concept is you're making such a good point. So you said the ability to just show up and do it and prove to yourself, to others that you can do it. So what does that look like? So does that look like NASA scientists? No. Like we have students, people that I have worked with, but also students that think that certain jobs are beneath them. Like they're looking for a higher job, whether they have a degree or not, but they haven't proven that they can actually show up, work an 8-hour day, go home, do the thing the next day, and do it all over again for 5 days in a row. But they're turning down jobs left and right because they're like, I could never do that. That's beneath me.
Yeah.
What would you say to that? Like they just need to prove themselves, first of all.
Full disclaimer, this is going to be my personal opinion. And like we live in a world where, I think a college education can teach you a lot. I think having the piece of paper is really, is beneficial, particularly if you know what you got out of it. But I definitely feel like there's a large push to just go to college. And I don't think everybody knows when they go to college, like what the purpose is or where they're going. And so sometimes that piece of paper isn't as useful as it initially is told. That being said, at the end of the day, a job is usually about doing something, and you're really measured on what you can do. And to me, like in any field in the world, most people are not going to hand the hardest job or the job with the most responsibility over to somebody who's never done anything before.
Tap.org, www.tapautism.org, link to our how do you interview somebody? Change the interview process. Make it a skills-based interview instead of an interview like me and Erin would not interview the person. They would actually show us how they can do it. Then that would be to Erin's point to see if they can actually do the job.
Yeah. And to me, like if you can show that you can do those basic things, you're going to earn the skills or the respect to show that you can do other things. And oftentimes if you're consistent and do the basic things well, you're going to be given opportunities, or people are going to see, oh, you have this capacity to do other things beyond just those basic things, and that will be the place where you can get better. So for example, like my work career, I started working at a food co-op when I was in 11th grade in high school. I then did landscaping and painting and basically like buildings and grounds work at the school that I went to senior year of high school and freshman year of college. After that, I worked in a daycare, basically just watching kids on the playground. I worked in an office filing paperwork all day. All of these were not necessarily the things that I really loved to do or felt super passionate about, but they gave me skills and they provided money that built a round set of tools that I had that led to me being able to do other jobs. So when I was in college then, I had never done swimming in my life. and I got hired to be a pool manager. So I hadn't even managed a pool before, but the skills that I had leading up to that led me to be able to figure things out pretty quickly. And so I figured out how to be a pool manager. And then had, on my resume, some leadership experience and managing people and keeping an environment and customer service,
Right.
etc. And so to me, you got to start somewhere, and to me, you can always try to start really high stakes, but the chances of you winning a high stakes game initially are low, right? And you want to feel confident in yourself. And to me, I think it's really important to get into something that you know you can do and you feel comfortable. Maybe you're even really good at doing it. You feel success in that, and that success will build confidence, and confidence will give you the capacity to keep growing and get to those places that are ultimately our dream, or
Right.
The long shot job, or the thing that we're really passionate about.
This will go to anyone any neurodiverse person, autism person that wants to listen, or job seeker that actually wants to listen and hear this. If you want to tune this part out, fine. I'm not going to force you to listen, but especially to the parents and the support network, to understand that even if the individual have a degree from college, like if they don't have the social, emotional understanding capacity, whatever the case might be, it won't matter what degree they have. Because if they go into that job, if they had an engineering degree, for example, and they went into an engineering job, but they have no skills in how to deal with the manager, it's a useless degree. It's not a useless degree but in this case it's useless, because if they don't know how to deal with the manager, so the best practices for job seekers, giving the manager, not disclosure you have autism, but telling the supports that you need to be successful at that job. But if you're always thinking, the manager's out to get me, or we've seen a lot of job seekers lost their job. They didn't actually understand. I've spoke to them. I've heard the whole situation, and it seems like they don't understand that maybe part of the reason, or all of the reason, but at least part of the reason they lost their job was their fault, not the manager's fault. And they're wanting to blame the company and this and that. And if you're going in with that mindset, if you're that type of person, or if you just don't understand how to properly work with management, your degree will not matter, is my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the piece of paper will help you get in the door on, interviews and stuff, but ultimately it's going to come down to, what you can do. And a big piece of navigating is being able to do it, is being able to, advocate and speak up and communicate with people, and also knowing cognitively what you can do. I also, to the defense of people communicating, I've also experienced individuals who are really good at communicating, but they can't actually do something, right?
Absolutely.
And so maybe not on paper. It sounds like you can do all these things when you actually can't. And I'd say, if you're that type of person, the best thing you can do is say exactly what you can do, because then no one's going to come in with some high level expectations. They're going to come in with expectations of exactly what is, and not something that's projected or theorized.
And not to scare managers out there, but this is also key. If you do a skills, so in many cases you might actually decline somebody. See, one of the worst things that I think can happen, Erin, is that it's a traditional interview where it's like they're going to ask a bunch of questions or whatever. The person has a high level degree from college, whatever. Somehow they pass the interview. Me and Eric are we're shocked that they passed the interview. I can't believe this person passed. Yeah. And a month into the job, they're having a miserable experience. But if you did a skills-based interview with the individual where they could show you how they do the job you need them to do, it's sad, but you might find out they didn't get the job and it didn't work out. You would find that out a lot sooner than having to wait 3-4 months into the job.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it comes back to the Meristem program. So one of the things that we tried to do is, if you look at brain development, again, not a psychologist, just do my reading at some level. What I've read of the research, your brain and your frontal lobe don't even fully connect or are developed until, late teens, early 20s. Maybe by 28, it's suggested that, you're kind of set. However, there are studies that suggest that if you keep moving and keep learning, you can keep your brain flexible at some level and keep developing neural pathways. But that doesn't start. Young children learn from imitation and experiencing their environment and trying that out and then seeing how it's successful or not, and then continuing to refine that process. And to me, at the end of the day, with Meristem, what we're really trying to do is when like a young child gets all these movement experiences through doing, they build a nervous system that ultimately leads them to be able to think more critically down the road as their brain gets to fully developed. And in my experience with neurodiversity at some level, or sometimes these developmental stages don't fully get to manifest to someone's chronological age, and if the doing and the movement isn't there initially, they might not ever get to the cognitive capacity or full cognitive capacity that somebody who's got all those developmental stages dialed in at some level might be able to reach. And that's no knock on anybody. That's just what I've observed. And so to me, like when you actually ask somebody to do it, particularly in the neurodiverse, you're starting a process that's going to lead to them being able to actually cognitively understand it more effectively than if I did a verbal presentation or told them. It's not necessarily going to sink in to action as much as just doing it will. And if you just do it, they're going to be able to understand more and be able to articulate more than if they didn't do it at all.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. What should we talk about next week? I don't know. There's so much here, but one thing is just different things that work. I mean, maybe you'll hear about my story next time. Maybe we'll have a guest, but we do want you to keep tuning in. We'll get into some of the employers and the successes that they've had with TAP, and we'll get into more details on that. Stay tuned for next week.
Yeah, and always if you have questions, reach out, reach out or send us questions. We're happy to discuss certain questions that make sense.
That's true too. Like we'd love to do a Q&A, so that could be a whole podcast. Just send us questions and we'll answer them.
Right on. You want to take us out, Harry?
Thank you. This has been wonderful. Voices of the Community.